Hey folks, this is a section from the stream. If you find the content here interesting and to your liking, please feel free to check out some of the streams that we do here. We have twice to three times a week we stream stuff. We talk about politics, philosophy, and even games sometime. So if you find this content interesting, feel free to check out the stream. And while you're at it, leave a like, subscribe, and if you have a chance, comment. It's always appreciated and it will take you only a few seconds, but it will help us in the algorithm greatly. Thank you and enjoy the video. I was not surprised that Mamdani's victory dominated, but on the grand scheme of things, I think Mamdani's victory was one of the less important, politically speaking, victories. I think the governor victory would be bigger in Virginia, and I think there was also a victory in New Jersey for Democrats for governor as well. I would have thought those two would be bigger, because although New York City is important, at the end of the day, it's a mayoral race, whereas this is a governor race, which impacts states, especially Virginia, which is like bordering DC. So I would imagine this would be a lot more important with Spanberger. But I understand why people are really excited about Mamdani's victory. But at the same time, I am skeptical about the importance of it in comparison to the other races. But hey, regardless, in Canadian politics, we have the Conservative Party who are in the opposition. We have multiple parties. So the party that wins the most seats in the parliament becomes the governing party. And the leader of that party becomes the prime minister. Today, right now, it's Prime Minister Mark Carney. He's the head of the Liberals. And by all accounts, he's very different than the previous head of the Liberal Party, former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And the difference comes down to really the focus of the administrations. So former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's administration was very much focused on economics, but more focused on social issues. And economics sometimes took a backseat more often than not. However, Prime Minister Carney has completely shifted focus of the Liberal Party towards economics. I haven't heard him to this day weigh in much on social issues. So the shift in focus kind of helped him win, because in 2025 was marked with a guaranteed victory originally for the Conservatives when former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was at the head of the party. However, due to internal pressures from party seniors, the Liberals suddenly came in swinging. So I think this will be interesting. So you can see here the Conservatives are bound to win. And for that matter, there was a conversation about majority win by the Conservative Party under the leadership of Honorable Pierre Poilievre. But Prime Minister Carney, or back then former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, stepped down from the party leadership, and at the time, Mark Carney, now Prime Minister Carney, took over the leadership of the party. And then here, I believe Trump's policy started hitting. You can see from 2023, the approval rating of the Liberals was going down. And then with Donald Trump's election and Prime Minister Carney taking over the party's leadership, the approval rating of the Liberals just skyrocketed, massively skyrocketed. And the approval rating of the Conservative Party of Canada didn't nosedive, but it went down undeniably. In 2021, they were kind of neck and neck, and then around 2023, Conservatives start taking the lead. Liberal approval rating started going down, and then suddenly, election of Donald Trump, Mark Carney takes over the leadership of the party, and bam! Nobody expected that. Everybody was expecting a Conservative majority, myself included. I didn't have thought Mr. Carney would, at the time, Mr. Carney had a chance to win that election, but he did. And they have a minority party, which means they don't have over 50% of the seats, but they have enough. If they have two more seats, interesting enough, they get the majority, which means they can pretty much pass whatever law they want. That's kind of what that means. But right now they need to negotiate with the opposition, which is the Conservative Party. Prime Minister Carney won, his focus was on economy. Despite the fact that the Conservatives lost that election, they got more seats than previous elections. The argument was that the Honorable Pierre Poilievre's leadership has had a positive impact. Last week, when the budget came out, there was debates about whether the Liberals can pass it or not, or is there going to be another election? Because if the Liberals' budget doesn't pass, there will be another election, and then we have to go back to the voting polls and voting and then vote and blah, 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 blah. And nobody wanted that. Two very interesting things has happened since then. The first one is that we had last week a Conservative member of Parliament switched caucuses. They crossed the aisle, as we say in Canada. They crossed the aisle. They went from one side, which were the Conservative side, to the Liberal side. So now the Honorable Mr. Chris Decorum is officially a Liberal member of Parliament. Now, this crossing the party line is usually a very controversial thing in a number of ways, because a lot of times when people vote, and I'm sure this is the same in the United States, but if anybody knows otherwise, feel free to correct me. But a lot of times when people go to vote, they don't necessarily vote for the person, they vote for the party. And a lot of times when you're going to vote, you see in the voting ballot, you see the name of the party the individual is affiliated with. And so a lot of people vote not necessarily for the person, but for the party, especially because the leader of the party is going to become the next prime minister. It's not just a vote for the individual, it's a vote for the party and the party leader. This usually gets crossing the aisle, it's changing caucuses, usually gets a lot of, let's say, flack, for the lack of a better word. But people get angry because they say, hey, you didn't run as a Liberal or as a Conservative or as an NDP or whatever, and now you just switch parties. This has happened before. I believe the last time I remember it, one of the times that I do remember happening very vividly was during actually the previous former Prime Minister Stephen Harper's time, when he tried to pass, I believe, a form of a gun registry regulation where it would have made it easier to acquire hunting rifles or something, I think. I don't remember the exact legislation. But one of the members of Parliament back then, the NDP was the second biggest party, so they were the opposition. I think his name was Bruce Heyer. He was a member of Parliament, and he was from more of a rural areas riding. Part of the NDP, New Democrat Party, left, very left. Last week, one of the Conservatives went to the Liberal side. And then another thing happened. Another Conservative member flat out resigned. And the person who resigned was from Alberta, I believe, Edmonton regions, one of the Edmonton ridings. Now, for those of you who don't know, Alberta is as conservative as they come. That's the Conservative stronghold province. That's where most of the Conservatives come from. That's where the leader of the opposition is right now riding. And they pretty much solidly what they call blue in Canada, but I guess in American it would be called a conservative riding. And the fact he would not have been able to cross the aisle, even if he wanted to, mainly because, well, as I said, Alberta runs very conservative. It's a very conservative province. Most of the riding, if not all of them, I think, are all Conservatives. So crossing the aisle and going to a Liberal side would be a big controversy if that were to happen. But these two, one as they call defection, going to the Liberal side, and another resigning, has led to a lot of people now questioning what is going to happen, what is happening with the Conservative Party. And apparently there was an interview with Honorable Decorum from Halifax, member of Parliament from Halifax, and he was not mincing words. For one, the Conservative platform came, I think, when the election was happening in 2025, very late. And a lot of voters were quite surprised by that, because the Conservatives had a long time to make their platform, and the fact that they came late really was not a very good sign for a lot of voters. And also, the Conservative Party was very much on the attack the whole time. And that also didn't leave a really positive message with the voters, because they were looking at the time, especially with the election of Donald Trump, they're looking for some sort of direction. And attacks can be effective, but that doesn't really give the voters the direction that the party will take the country. Whereas when Mark Carney's Prime Minister Carney's campaign also had a lot of attack ads, but at the same time there was a balance between this is the direction we're going to take this, and this is our attacks. What we're seeing with this, I don't know. This is at this stage, it's a he said, she said situation. But one thing that I want to point out for all for our fellow American viewers, this is a little bit out there in Canadian politics. Like Canadian politics, a lot of these discussions are done behind closed doors, and the idea is that when it comes to the public presentation, whether with opposition or within the party, you always to some extent try to respect decorum. It's very rare, even a member of parliament who crossed the aisle, to say, oh, the other party is like a frat house, and then the other party hits back with, oh, this person is just a liar. Like, I know in American politics that the discourse is a lot more crass than this, but by Canadian standard, this is a little bit, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I haven't seen it get like this level of like back and forth like this. Public disparagement and stuff. And I've heard also that MP Chris Tremont, he's also getting a lot of hate messages, and the RCMP is now, the Royal Canadian Police is now looking into it. So it hasn't been smooth sailing. My opinion is, as you guys saw, they said that if more members of parliament join the Liberals, then they're going to have a majority government, which means they're going to have more than 50%, I think 51%. I don't exactly remember the numbers, but that means they don't really need to negotiate with other parties. They can just pass whatever law they're trying to pass. In this case, the budget is the big one, which has been getting pushback from a number of other parties. All of them have been pushing back. I don't know how I feel about the fact that you can win a majority without actually going to an election. I understand, and I don't fault the members of parliament from crossing the aisle, and I don't also fault the Conservative for being angry. I understand it. I think the way this engagement, actually this would be an interesting topic to look into when it comes to not just like American exporting like very like bombastic language and bombastic political discourse in public, but rather the question of how party leadership or leadership of a country or important political figures who people look up to engage in public discourse, and what type of precedent that sets for, well, the voters and the general public. This was one of the, I don't know if you guys ever heard of Harvey C. Mansfield, but Harvey C. Mansfield is a professor. I think he retired now. He must be like in his 80s. Professor at Harvard University. He was very conservative, but when it came to Trump, he used to criticize him by saying Trump is unpresidential, and that was his critique. And I think that's kind of goes what I'm trying to get at with regard to this type of language, is that when you're presidential, you're supposed to have some sort of decorum when you're engaging in public discussions, because you want the rest of the population to understand that there's a boundaries of, I guess you can call it respectability when it comes to disagreements. I think this has been a particularly nefarious effect of not just politics, but also social media, where we are consistently rewarded with more bombastic approach, less nuanced discussions. I think there's a discussion to be had. I myself am conflicted, as I said, about the idea of a party winning majority without going through an election because the other party's members are defecting. I don't think that is a sign of a healthy democracy per se, or a liberal democracy. I like to see the parties go into election and get the people's vote and then have either a majority or a minority government, or win or lose. This idea of defection doesn't sit very right with me, even though I understand why members of these politicians have done it. And still, it's a little bit weird to have a party gain suddenly a lot of power, even though they haven't gone through an election process. How big figures send societies to operate. Yeah, I think that's true to a large extent. When you have massive figures, when you have larger than life figures, they kind of set the tone. And this is why the old saying goes, heavy is the head that wears the crown. You're supposed to be upholding a certain boundaries to tell the rest of the population, hey, listen, you can't transgress these boundaries. But if you're consistently transgressing those boundaries, you're consistently attacking those boundaries, and you have no filter, then the rest of the population is going to look at you and emulate you and go, well, you have no filter, why would I? And I feel like that is increasingly where politics and political discourse is going. There are a lot of pushback, and different countries face this differently, but I'm not a fan of it at all, especially when it comes to engagement with other content creators. I've seen some people do, and this is one of the reasons why a lot of content creator gets suddenly big and goes quote unquote viral. If you're making a bombastic statement and attacking somebody, and you're just like super like out there, say something super controversial, you're getting rewarded for it. I think this creates a very bad incentive when it comes to political engagement, because politics is a serious matter sometimes. Like, not sometimes, always. You gotta take political issues seriously, because it affects millions upon millions of people. In Canada, party is pretty much the most important element of politics. Like in American politics, you can have individuals run against party platforms sometimes, or like go against the grain of the party. Like, for example, I know what's her name, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think that's her name. She's ruffling some feathers in the Republican Party, and she's still part of the Republican Party. In Canada, we have very, very strong party whip, which means that you can't really go against the party's wishes. This is why the leadership sets the tone, but also for the leadership to remain in leadership position, you need the support of the rest of the party, especially senior members. This is one of the reasons why, for example, the previous prime minister, former prime minister Justin Trudeau stepped down, because within the party there was a pressure for him to step down, and that's why he stepped down. This shows there's a lot of cracks within the party dynamic that needs to be fixed. Whereas with the Liberals, there doesn't seem to be much of a crack. The new leadership under Prime Minister Carney has set a very, very clear direction, and the rest of the Liberal Party seems to be following it. Whether they disagree or agree with it, whether they like it or not, they see this as the direction of the party. So there's an incentive for them to, even if they disagree with the leadership, they have a direction. We are going somewhere. We know where we're going, and the Canadian public seems to approve of them. So we'll see what happens. This was just very interesting to me, especially for the fact that people cross the floors, which I find it irks me a little bit, but at the same time, I understand both sides of the argument.